Yes, here we go, back again on main stage. We're now going to talk about the future of smart buildings. That session is being powered by bGrid, and we will have a keynote from Karl from Ginderdeure from bGrid, and after that we will have an amazing panel with Deb Noller from Switch Automation, Antionio Vega from Enappgy, and of course Karl will also join that panel, and that panel will be led by Elizabeth Nelson from Smart Building Certification. Now we have Karl here in our studio. Welcome, Karl.
Hi, Walter. Thanks.
How are you?
Good. I'm doing very well. Thank you.
How is the industry changing these days in smart buildings?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time. We'll discuss it later on as well, but it's like a perfect storm ongoing. So you see all kinds of forces speeding up the adoption of technology at this moment. So I think that's very interesting.
Well, you can kick it off. So I will give you the floor and, well, enjoy.
Thank you. Well, first of all, Walter, thank you for having me here today. And I think a big congrats on the event for the past 2 days. I think not only in terms of content, but also the awards. It's very nice to see this. My name is Karl. I work for bGrid, and I'm responsible for the sales and marketing. And in the coming more or less 10 minutes, I'd like to tell you something more about what's happening in the market, what we define as bGrid as being what is a smart building, how do we realize that, and at the end, if you have time left, I'd love to show you a practical example of some of the things that we are working on. So let's start with what's actually happening at this point in the market. It is a perfect storm, and that weather front that have been forming in the past years, I would say. So for years we have been talking about increasing the environmental standards of our buildings, increasing their sustainability. At the same time, we were talking about, how can you reduce the management cost and the operational expenses for those buildings. Then COVID came in, and I think that accelerated a few other topics. And one of them is that the standard in terms of hygiene, health and well-being and air quality that we put on the buildings is increasing. At the same time, we are rapidly changing the way we are working, and with that, also the use of the office building will change, so the factory office is gone. And lastly, and I think that started maybe 6-7 years ago with the edge here in Amsterdam, is that the office is still being seen as an extension of the company branding. So and technology in your office is a means to an end, so it helps you to attract and retain talent and get exposure and branding. And I truly think if you want to solve and do something on all of these topics at the same time, a smart building is the only answer to that question. So that forms the perfect storm that we are in at this point in time. Well, if we continue, I think that, and this has been research is ongoing for a long time, but also the world deserves better buildings. So if you look into office buildings more specifically, and you look into what people find important into their office space and how satisfied they are with that, you could see that 80% of the things that people complain about are items or topics that with a smart technology you can benchmark and then manually improve, or the technology itself can interact and improve the experience for the user on that field. So that being said, if we continue, what is then a smart building? Well, I'm giving you my perspective and the company's perspective on that, but obviously there are many answers to this question. But at least a smart building is a building that generates values for all its stakeholders across 2 different axes. The first axis is the building-centric axis. So there you have to realize that traditional buildings have data, but it's not accessible. It's unstructured. So the first step is to get data accessible and have structured data. You can then provide dashboards and insights. You can generate conclusions out of that and then actions. But the higher end goal is a digital twin that does all of that autonomously for you. And that's a cooperation of technology and IT, obviously. The second part is more the human-centric axis. So that's all about how do the users of the building experience the building and how do they benefit from smart technology and smart applications. So the most simple example of that is, for example, room booking. You all know the feeling if you go into the office, you look for a meeting room. All of them are booked, but if you walk by them, all of them are available. So the automatic release of meeting rooms is the lowest step, and then if you go higher up that value chain, you have the cooperation with your colleagues. It's all about increasing your individual productivity in the building because the building is it's healthy and it's comfortable. And so that's how we at least look at smart building technology and the developments in that area. And we also believe you should not solve that by adding yet another siloed system to the real estate. So this is what the construction industry or the real estate industry has been doing for years. We all believe it needs to be integrated and working together. That sounds very simple. Unfortunately, sometimes you can lose track, and that is because traditionally the technology in these buildings was delivered by a few big manufacturers and suppliers, and they delivered the whole technology stack. But the past 10 and maybe 20 years, and at least the past 5 years, from the top, from the IT landscape, from the application landscape, many different companies arose, and they provide their services to that building industry. And on top of that, there was an intermediate layer that maybe was founded 5, 6, 7 years ago, were companies that started making IoT sensors. They were developing, or they are developing smart building platforms, and all of that together. If you look at this, maybe the key message is that a smart building is an ecosystem of companies working together. It's not more one siloed vertical single-sided supplier. And I think that's the biggest change that is ongoing at the moment. And this is speeding up considerably at this point in time. So what do we then do? We developed, 5, 6 years ago, we developed a sensor, a multi-sensor, the node that you see here in the image. We fit them in a fixed grid throughout the building. And all of these devices, they measure the same thing. They measure temperature, they measure humidity, they measure sound intensity, movement, and also air quality. And the sensing is actually used to integrate with the automation of the building, such that you can steer the ventilation, the heating and the cooling, the sun blinds. It's a light management system, so you can connect your lighting fixtures to the sensor, and then the sensor can switch them on and off. And thirdly, it's a positioning system. So the device allows the smartphone to position itself in the building because that has privacy data related to it. The bottom layer, the asset tracking, the system can track assets throughout the building. Now, all the data that we generate, we structure that, we put that into the API, and we make that accessible to the ecosystem surrounding us. Ourselves today, we have 45 partners within that top layer that provide value to the end users, to the different stakeholders. And for us, the key thing here is that we keep on developing the data that we put in the API. And the key thing there to remember is that the bottom layer is technology. You implement that with a long horizon, so that will be in your building for 10, 15 years. The top layer is fast developing. To think of desk booking in times of COVID. So you want to split the layers, but you want to have the ability to update the technology that you implemented software-matically such that you can generate new endpoints. So a concrete example, we developed an algorithm that allows the sensors to count people in their side of view. That is an algorithm that we can release to all 35 or 30 sites that we have live. So that's a way for us to continuously keep on developing the buildings that we have. To continue, I'll be very brief on this. I think the only way you can make cost-effectively a building smart is if you exchange traditional systems for smart building technology. That's the key message here. And then you can replace the BMS sensors, your presence sensors, your light switches, and so on. Going to the end, I have 2 or 3 slides left, but I also want to show you something on the value that a smart building can generate for you. And I told you in the beginning that we believe that a smart building should generate value for all stakeholders. So if you look into the tenant, for him it's all about the well-being and the experiences you have, but it's also about increasing the utilization. For the operator, it's all about increasing its operations, so you can automate quite a lot, but you also get better insights, and that allows you to optimize and save operational costs. And for the landlord or the owner, it's about increasing or maximizing return on investment. And yes, today you can get a higher rental price for your property, but it's also about being able to provide new services to your tenants, about increasing the valuation of your property, and so on. So some of the things that we are working on today, the past year we developed what we call a comfort parameter, and actually that combines all of the sensing values that we have from the device into one single score on how the quality or the comfort within that room or area or floor or wing is. And we can compare that across all of the buildings. In the example here, you see the thermal comfort is low, so if you would be the operator, that would be something to look into. But this doesn't bring any value on the human-centric side to the end user. So that's why, beginning of this year, we met with one of our partners in the ecosystem. He was developing a room booking application. So that's where we said, hey, it's ultra interesting in the data that we have if you would include that into the room booking system. Because what then happens is that if you, as a user, you want to book a meeting room within the building, the system can automatically filter and provide you the best available meeting room at that point in time or in the future for the purpose that you have. Okay? So it includes now the climate data, the comfort, the air quality, and filters on basis of that. And this is something we co-developed, and you can use bGrid sensor data for that, but you could also use other sensors to provide that input. So, and it was built on top of Office 365 to keep it very simple. Maybe the last slide, I have some background on us, so I've been talking quite a lot about this industry, but bGrid founded around 6 years ago. We have done over 35 buildings by now in Europe and the US. We have realized and we monitor on a daily basis 300,000 square meters of office space, and this will be 400,000 plus by the end of this year. And so that also tells you something about the pace of the industry, how that is going today. That was my story water for today. I'm not sure if you have any questions left.
Well, we have a lot of questions, of course, but we're going to do that into the panel. So you can move over to studio number 5.
I will. I'll take some time.
Yeah. No, and join Elizabeth on the panel, so we can also add Deb Noller and Antionio Vega. Let's see if they are also online right now. It would be. So Elizabeth, I will like to give you the floor right now, and yeah.
Thank you, and welcome, Karl.
Thank you.
Great presentation, and we're getting in Deb and Antonio. Are you guys here? Can you hear us? Can you see us?
Yes.
Oh,
here.
wow. Your backgrounds are amazing. Very relaxing. And some blue sky. I love that. Well, I love this panel. I know you all well. You're partners of Smart Building Certification and doing amazing things. I'm just going to give a quick intro because we have a really global group here, everywhere from America to Mexico to the Netherlands, and expats moving within there. We have Deb Noller, the CEO of Switch Automation. It's a global real estate software company that helps property owners and facility managers reduce operating costs, improve energy efficiency, and deliver exceptional occupant satisfaction. We have Antionio Vega, Enappgy, is specialized in smart energy efficiency solutions for corporate commercial real estate. They combine the newest sustainable technologies with an IoT platform in order to achieve the highest energy savings at the same time. And then Karl probably needs no introduction after your last presentation, but the CCO of bGrid enables third-party smart building hardware and software develops to easily connect to bGrid. So welcome. I'm so excited to chat with all of you. I think you guys are doing amazing things in this and really trailblazing smart buildings. So the million-dollar question that seems to start all smart building conferences, what is a smart building? Antonio, do you want to start that one off?
Yes, of course. Thank you. And also great to see you guys.
Yeah, great to see you.
Yeah, I heard a comparison once about a smart building being like a smartphone. In the reality, we're talking about an integration of a current situation with new technologies. So I will consider a smart building more like an enhancement procedure, like a prosthesis in a body to improve certain processes and efficiency in this case. So I will see that if I may make a comparison, will be a prosthesis of the building. And that's defined by the customer, not by us, the developers of the technologies.
I love that. And it also kind of feels the same, right? We can't go back. Once we see what a smartphone can do, I can't get myself anywhere without my navigation system now. So it's kind of similar in that way. All right, so one of the things, Karl, that you were talking about was this is a perfect storm.
Yeah.
I love that idea. What do you guys think about that? You know, Deb, can you talk about this? Do you also agree that it's a perfect storm right now for smart buildings?
Yeah, totally. So first of all, the term smart buildings, just going back to your previous question, I'm not a huge fan of that term actually, because I think what it does is it gives people an excuse to say, oh, well, none of my buildings are ever going to be smart because they're kind of like regular buildings. And I think it's an excuse to not move towards a smart digital future. So I probably prefer the term the connected building to the smart building, because everybody just imagines that bright, shiny thing like the edge. In terms of the perfect storm, you know, we had COVID, so that really shone a light on why you need connected digital buildings. You know, all of a sudden you can't put people into buildings anymore. You have to hibernate buildings, you have to dial them down, you have to be able to manage them in remotely. And so that really shone a light on why these technologies should have been adopted. But there's a whole heap of other factors that are kind of lining up to create the why now of 2021 and smart and connected buildings. And it's the climate change is now a climate crisis, and most governments around the world, not mine, but everybody else, is recognizing that climate crisis requires governments to take, you know, strong action and regulation. The investors in buildings are also demanding really strong responses to ESG. We've got the next generation of managers coming through that just can't understand why you would want to walk around a building and manually write down all of the meter readings and bring that back and punch into a spreadsheet. And then just to add to that, we've got the post-COVID stimulus funding, where governments are really looking for how are they going to stimulate their economies post-COVID. And so you've got this enormous amount of money that's pouring into the economy to create smart, green, digital jobs. And a lot of that is going towards the built environment. And then, as if all of that wasn't enough, now they've finally acknowledged that COVID is an aerosol spread virus. And so now we're going to have even a stronger focus on HVAC and air quality in buildings.
Yeah, amazing. And yeah, what do we call the opposite of a smart building, right? Do we call it a dumb building? So I love that point of a connected building. It kind of creates a little bit less of a huge leap to get into there, because I think there is that stigma. So you talked about ESG, greenwashing. Karl, are we greenwashing? Are we done with greenwashing? We were talking about the goals for 2050. Is that just something that people are saying by the time we get there, and I'll be in my 70s, we'll have figured it out? Or
I hope not, by the way. I hope we did, but I hope not. It takes until that time. I find that hard, because if you talk about, you know, if you look back why bGrid was founded so many years ago and where we are today, I think, you know, sustainability, energy consumption reduction, all of that was definitely one of the pillars that we founded on, but it was also the following of what we call now in this conversation the connected building, right? So it's not per se the higher goal. I think if you know, it provides, I think if you make the building really smart, it automatically saves you energy, because the building adapts to how you use it, right? So, and then greenwashing, you can't do that anymore, right? Yeah. So you're actually realizing it.
And our clients, Antonio, can you build on that? Because you actually, you talk about this, you know, you save a ton of money for your clients. This is part of your business offering. Is it still that messaging, or can you sell through sustainability? Some people say, don't call it sustainability, call it building performance, but maybe that's changing. What are you seeing?
I mean, the word is totally, in my opinion, is irrelevant. I mean, calling this a smart building or not, or calling a better building, that doesn't really kind of tilt the decision making of the owners. What I've seen is that indeed energy savings is still 2021 the trigger for the projects, but it's just mostly in countries like the Netherlands, kind of for some customers a nice to have. That means that the kilowatt hour is so low that saving energy is not business-wise interesting. But this is kind of the reason why we provide a platform that is based on energy savings, but can achieve much more because the energy savings is something is or expected or a nice to have. But based on that, you can build up and then deliver some analytics that can improve primary processes. And there is the decision making starting to, kind of change in the minds of the owners of the buildings mostly. So it's a combination of both situations, but still, sustainability is our biggest challenge right now. But as I said, countries like the Netherlands, where the kilowatt hour is so low, so cheap, we have to find something else, an added value that can trigger the owners of the buildings to think about the future of their properties.
Well, and that reminds me of something that came up yesterday when we were talking about the future of flex work, and they were saying all work is going to be flex, and we're going to work at the time we want and the day we want, so it's not going to be the 9 to 5 anymore. So do you think that we're seeing maybe a shift a little bit where if we don't have a smart building and we are working all the time, then we're just going to have our heat running all the time, our lights on all the time, and then get back a little bit? Deb, do you have any ideas about this? What do you?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the greenwashing thing, I mean, there was a lot done, 10 years ago around sustainability and different geographies around the world. Australia and the UK and Singapore were, and the Scandinavian countries led the way here in the whole push towards sustainability, but they only got to a certain point. And then if you went to the US, just like Antonio was saying, the cost of electricity was so low that the economics just made it where people didn't really care that much about the cost, about saving electricity, because one, the cost of power was so low. And then you counter that also with the fact that any savings that the landlord makes towards the building often got passed on to the tenants. So there was this kind of misaligned incentives. And so everybody just throws their hands up and goes, well, let's not do anything at all. But there has been huge strides made in the sustainability area for a long time. And we've got GRESB reporting now, which originated in the Netherlands and is widely accepted as the way that real estate reports on this. But we're now in the next generation of sustainability. And at the same time, the governments have recognized that they need to create the incentives for the landlords to care more. And there is no better example of this than New York City. New York is almost maxed out on their power supply demand. The last thing they want to do as a state is build another power station. Buildings are the largest contributor of carbon emissions globally. And all we need to do is actually do more with the same amount of electricity that we already have to reach the next 50 years of growth. And so it's up to the governments now to come in with regulatory incentives to make the landlords care enough to actually do something about it, which is exactly what they've done. And so if the landlords don't start working towards net zero and reporting on this in real time, then what's going to happen is they'll get these fines of like $2 million per year on a building. So I think the greenwashing days are gone because the governments can't afford to ignore this problem anymore.
Well, that's good to hear. I love that.
Well, I hope so anyway.
I hope so. So where do we go from here? Karl, what are the next steps? What call to action can we have? How can we make this an easier transfer maybe from, as Deb was saying, we're maybe not going for a smart building, but a connected building, a more informed, more sustainable building?
Yeah, so for me, and this is from my experience with bGrid in dealing with the market at this point in time, but I do think, so what I love, my call for action would be for the competitors, the partners, the industry, everyone here, to work together and together with you with the smart building certification to define what is a connected or smart building definition and use that to break the silos that we have, because currently we talk today about 3 stakeholders, the owner, the tenant, the operator. But you also have the consultant and the contractor, and if they don't work along, with all respect, it's going nowhere. So, and that is, I think, the biggest hurdle that we now see. We see that it is tackling down, it's still going slow, but people start to adapt to the idea that, you don't think in the silos of electrical and mechanical and water saving, but you combine them and look at the bigger picture. And I think with that, some of them will need to adapt and develop new business models.
Yeah, I love that. And that's exactly what smart building certification is about, de-siloing, working together, making progress together, and working on that definition. And you three are amazing partners for that. So just going back a little bit, yeah, Antonio, when you look at, can you build on that a little bit, the de-siloing of the industry?
Yes, I actually wanted to use the comment Deb made about that we have the misconception that a smart building has to be per definition an edge building. We've implemented some projects with buildings that are really 20 years, 25 years old. So I believe also in the proposition and analysis of a smart building certification, it is possible to show this kind of owners and this kind of implementations are also possible for this kind of buildings. So I will say that the call to action will be indeed to everybody, just to whether it is via smart building certification analysis or even a quick scan, just to understand what is the situation of your building right now and what do you need to get to the next level that fulfills what you need at that moment. So I will say every single building has the potential to be a smart building. It's just the way you start with that. And if you can reuse the current sensors, for example, then you're doing the most smart way. It's just not wasting, not ordering another sensor, not placing another sensor, but just getting the data and using that data to achieve the goals that you have. In some other cases, there are no sensors available, so you will need to implement the sensors in the building. So that's my call to action will be just to start somewhere, but start just by analyzing what is the current situation and what can you do at that moment.
I love that. Well, and we should also recognize that the smartest building that just got awarded for this year was a refurbishment. It was not a new building. It had it was really well done. It had a ton of services. It was connected. The integrative design was really there. It was modular. This building was not created to be smart, but this building is incredibly smart. Well, the smartest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree to what Antonio is saying. I think so. What it popped in my mind is that a smart building, realizing that, people look at it as it being a project, but it's a process, right? It's you do one step at a time, and you continuously develop that. And then you can end up being the edge, but you can also stop halfway if it doesn't bring you any value to go further, right? It should not be the goal at it.
Yeah, it's not an all or nothing. You can just start optimizing things. And I think there's going to be a lot more rewards from government, from organizations, from certifications, from different funds that are coming together. So hopefully all of those incentives and just saving money that you don't need to spend at the end of the day will come together.
But if I may add at that point, yes, it is important to save money. And yes, it is important that the governments participate in or even giving a fee if they are not fulfilling with energy obligations, for example, or also kind of a discounts in their energy bill. But that is not going to solve it. We need to take a step further. We need to talk to the owners and say, okay, I can ensure you 50% less people getting sick in these pandemic moments. That kind of questions, that kind of arguments are going to move the market, not the savings and not the fees.
Yeah. And I think we don't recognize the full extent of what can happen when you change a building and a community. Somebody was talking to me about the story of Yellowstone when they reintroduced wolves to this park that had changed dramatically since the park started. And it actually, the wolves started hunting the elk, and the elk stopped eating these branches, and the beavers started building dams, and this ecosystem changed. And I feel like that's something that we haven't gotten our head totally around. When you change a building to be better for the people in it, for it to be better for the world, to be better for the operation and innovation, what can happen Deb, do you have any thoughts about kind of the ecosystem of smart and the potential? I think we're thinking too small. We don't realize the ripple effect of this.
Yeah, so I think there's two things. Building on what Antonio said, was there's no excuse not to start today on the transition. It's not I need to wait until I'm building my next building and build a smart building. No, you have a portfolio of buildings that you need to make those buildings smarter, and you either have buildings that have some sort of digital capable systems where the data is disconnected, so you should be connecting into those systems and ingesting that data and doing something useful with it. Or you've got older buildings that don't have those types of systems, but there are a whole raft of technologies these days that are very cost effective that can be retrofit, that will give you some sort of data out of those buildings. And so there's no excuse for not starting and moving towards this digital future. And I think just to add to the other part of your question around this ecosystem, I think once in our lifetime we have these events that change things for the rest of time. So if you think about 9/11, that changed the way that airports operate all around the world for the rest of time. No one can imagine ever going to the airport anymore and not going through an X-ray machine and putting their carry-on luggage through. That's just what we accept as normal now. And I think what's happened with the pandemic, if we're really going to get people back into buildings in an unknown environment, so I'm not talking about your home, I'm talking about going back into the office and back into gyms, I think it's going to become perfectly normal for everybody to understand normal levels of CO2, normal levels of air refresh. And just like we kind of had to educate ourselves on cholesterol readings and what that meant, we will all become very familiar with what air quality ratings mean, and we'll be able to assess our risk. And landlords there'll be an expectation that those metrics will be provided publicly and to all of their tenants. And I think that's going to become an expectation post-COVID.
I love that. I think I'm just, thank you all for chatting with me and, well, with both of us, Karl. And I think one of the things that maybe I can leave this with is I've really seen how all of you work with your clients, and while this can be seeming like a daunting task, I really feel like all of you have a very empowering process, and that it can be kind of a fascinating and an interesting way of saying, oh, I can know this, and I can optimize my building, and I can save money, and I've just seen that it's a very energizing. So when you say just get started, it's because of that excitement and because of that control over your building and your finances and all of that. So I absolutely agree, get started, even if it's a little project, because it's so addictive to get your building smarter and to go through that process. Thank you all for chatting with me. Thank you for being part of Smart Building Certification, and until next time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.